Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's August 5th, 2026, and we are going to read from Judges chapter 19, and then in Acts, we're going to read from 23, chapter 23. So, Acts 23, but first we're going to read Judges 19, 1 9. We've said as this book of Judges concludes that we're getting examples of just how far Israel has fallen in this time period and why Judges has to come to an end, why that system just doesn't work out. And we're going to transition into a king. In fact, we keep seeing that refrain that there was no king in those days, so the people did what they wanted. Now, the ultimate king will be Jesus, but that's where we are in Judges. We just saw Dan and Micah and this renegade Levite priest. We're going to see even more horrendous stuff as we continue. So let's go ahead and we're going to read Judges chapter 19. So this is a new story about how far Israel has fallen. And it came to pass in those days, when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. He took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him, and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there 4 whole months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back, having his servant and a couple of donkeys with him. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the father of the young woman saw him, he was glad to meet him. Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him, and he stayed with him 3 days. So they ate and drank and lodged there. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with the Levite being married, but this is a concubine. So he married a slave, essentially, is what it's telling us. And she was a harlot. So we're starting the story on the borderline of sin, maybe a little bit pushed over to sin. Some things that shouldn't have been happening, and that's where we're going to start this story. Verse 5, Then it came to pass on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning, and he stood to depart. But the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, Refresh your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward go your way. So they sat down, and the 2 of them ate and drank together. Then the young woman's father said to the man, Please be content to stay all night. Let your heart be merry. And when the man stood to depart, his father-in-law urged him, so he lodged there again. Then he arose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart, but the young one's father said, Please refresh your heart. So they delayed until afternoon, and both of them ate. So we're kind of seeing he wants to leave, but hey, we're going to party. Well, why leave when we're partying and we're having fun? So he's delayed him multiple days. Not in a hurry to actually go back to his duties, our Levite. Verse 9, And when the man stood to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the young one's father, said to him, Look, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night. So he tries one more time. See, the day is coming to an end. Lodge here that your heart may be merry. Tomorrow go your way early so that you may get home. However, the man was not willing to spend that night, so he rose and he departed, and he came opposite Jebus. That is Jerusalem. So Jerusalem has not been conquered like it was supposed to be. With him were the 2 saddled donkeys. His concubine was also with him. They were near Jebus, and the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, Come, please, and let us turn aside into this city of the Jebusites and lodge in it. But his master said to him, We will not turn aside here into a city of foreigners who are not of the children of Israel. We will go on to Gibeah. So he said to his servant, Come, let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or in Ramah. So they're about 40 miles out of Jerusalem. And they passed by, and they went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. Actually, they're probably much closer to Jerusalem. I'm thinking of what we're going to see in Acts. Okay. Back on track. That's just a little diversion. Let's get back to verse 15. They turned aside there to go to lodge in Gibeah, and when he went in, he sat down in the open square of the city, for no one would take them into his house to spend the night. We've heard that story before, isn't that Sodom and Gomorrah? Just then, an old man came in from his work in the field that evening, who was also from the mountains of Ephraim, who was staying in Gibeah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. And when he raised his eyes, he saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" So he said to him, "We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah. Now I am going to the house of the Lord." So he's going to Shiloh, which is where the temple where the tabernacle is set up. "But there is no one who will take me into his house, although we have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for myself. For your female servant and for the young man who is with your servant, there is no lack of anything." And the old man said, "Peace be with you. However, let all your needs be my responsibility." So hospitality is being shown. "Only do not spend the night in the open square." So he brought him into his house and gave fodder to the donkeys. And they washed their feet, and they ate and they drank. As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him carnally." This is exactly like Sodom and Gomorrah. And I guess the way to think of that is not necessarily that it's homosexuality run rampant. This is power. I think I've heard it put that this is like rape in prison. It's to show power and dominance over it. "Oh, you're a stranger? Well, we're going to dominate you and show you who's boss here in our city. We're the Benjamites, and you will do what we say." Definitely not hospitality. Verse 23, "But the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, 'No, my brethren, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Seeing this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage.'" Well, very nice of that old man. "Look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now." Whoops. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, well, that obedience and righteousness has been perverted to this place that's considered an acceptable alternative. "Oh no, I can't let you rape him. You can rape them. That'll be fun, won't it? Okay, let's do that instead." So we're seeing how far Israel has fallen. They're just like Sodom and Gomorrah. So has become this land of the Benjamites. Let's pick it back up at 24 again. "Look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now. Humble them and do with them as you please, but to this man do not do such a vile thing." But the men would not heed him. So the man took his concubine and brought her out to them. So her husband throws her out. "And they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. So after he threw her out, he went to sleep. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was till it was light. When her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, 'Get up, let's get going.' But there was no answer. So the man lifted her onto the donkey, and the man got up and went into his place." We said, just like Sodom and Gomorrah, only now it's the Benjamites who would do such a thing. And we have a Levite who really doesn't care that much either. Could it get worse? Verse 29, "When he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And so it was that all who saw it said, 'No such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up.'" And we're going to see what they say tomorrow. Let's go over to Acts, and we're going to read chapter 23. All right, so Paul has just asserted his Roman citizenship, which got the Roman garrison that had him prisoner to stop. They were going to scourge him. They stopped immediately, and now they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with Paul. And they take him before the Sanhedrin, and that's where we're going to pick it up here in Acts 23. "Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council," the Sanhedrin, "said, 'Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day.'" So he's going to give them a testimony again. A little bit different this time. And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. And that word strike, I mean, they beat on him. Bam! Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? So he'd done nothing. He's supposed to talk and give his side of the story, but he gets beat for it. And those who stood by said, do you revile God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. Now, did he know and was being sarcastic? You can read that into here. Did he not know because he hasn't been in Jerusalem for a while? You can read that in here. What we want to see is once the high priest status is asserted, Paul says, you know what? The man's horrible, and he really was. Historically, he was an awful person, abusive, but he holds this office, and this office is ordained by God, so I'm going to respect the office. Even when I don't respect the man, I'll respect the office. Verse 9, so he repents of speaking evil against Ananias. Verse 6, but when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out on the council, men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead. I am being judged. So really shrewd on Paul's part. The Sanhedrin is made up of Sadducees and Pharisees. The Sadducees held the high priesthood and the high offices. The Pharisees were basically everybody else. And Sadducees and Pharisees were kind of opposed to each other. They didn't really like each other all that much. They had to work together. But Paul sees his opportunity. He says, you know what? There's the divide. I can get them to divide and argue against themselves, and that'll give me the way to get in with the argument I want to make. And specifically, the Sadducees accepted the first 5 books of the Old Testament as the law. They could have done without the rest. Moses is big. There is no resurrection, no angels, and we'll see that. So he's going to exploit that. I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. So hey, Pharisees, look at me. I'm you. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. Hey, that thing that the Sadducees always are on about against you, that's why they've dragged me in here. This is the old story of Sadducees and Pharisees. Verse 7, and when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. So it worked perfectly. Got them divided. Now it's no longer a unified front against Paul. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection and no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, we find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God. He got right into the disagreement between them, which is the resurrection. And we see historically, Pharisees did come to Christ. Some of them, a lot of them. Sadducees, we never see any of them come to Christ. So the resurrection was it. Christ and him crucified and resurrected. And he knows he's not going to get a fair trial before the whole Sanhedrin, but he's going to get sympathetic ears from the Pharisees, and that's what he appeals to. And it worked, because then they're saying, well, you know what? If God spoke to him, God spoke to him. We'll have to see how it plays out. Verse 10, now when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. Now, as the Sadducees and the Pharisees are fighting, the commander says, oops, this is just like it happened yesterday. I better go save Paul. But the following night the Lord stood by him, Paul, and said, be of good cheer, Paul, For as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome. So the Holy Spirit comes and tells them, okay, you know what, things are going to be okay here in Jerusalem. You're going to Rome. That's where it's going to happen. Verse 12, and when it was day, some of the Jews banded together. They bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Now there were more than 40 who had formed this conspiracy, and it's not the Pharisees. These would be aligned with the Sadducees. They came to the chief priests and the elders, and they said, we have bound ourselves under a great oath that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him, but we are ready to kill him before he comes near. So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. And this is really about the only place we see any of Paul's family show up. Why is he in Jerusalem and not home in Tarsus? We don't know. Maybe he is a student just like Paul was, who was sent to Jerusalem to learn. We don't know, but luckily he overhears the story. He tells his uncle, hey, something's going to happen. So verse 17, then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, hey, take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him. So he took him and he brought him to the commander and said, Paul the prisoner called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you. Then the commander took him by the hand, went aside, and asked privately, what is it that you have to tell me? And he said, the Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him, but do not yield to them. For more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him, and now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you. So the commander let the young man depart and commanded him, tell no one that you have revealed these things to me. And he called for 2 centurions, saying, prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. So he must have taken this very seriously, because that's about half the troops that he has in Jerusalem. Provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. He wrote a letter in the following manner, Claudius Lysis to the most excellent governor Felix. Greetings, this man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. Well, he's changing the order of the story a little bit to make himself look better, of course, but he's decided, you know what, this is getting more complicated than I want to deal with. I'm going to send it to the governor. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but he had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. Don't pay your taxes, riots, revolts, death to Caesar. That would be something he as a Roman would consider worthy of chains and death penalties. Just an argument amongst the Jews. Christianity they see as just a faction of Jews. He's like, okay, they're just arguing amongst themselves over some theological point. Nothing's here. There is nothing here. He's really innocent, but I don't want to be the one that says he's innocent. Verse 30, and when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell. So he sends Paul away, and he's telling the accusers, you need to go after him and make your case in front of Felix. I'm done. Verse 31, then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. That's about 40 miles. I knew we'd get there eventually. The next day, they left the horsemen to go on with him and return to the barracks. Now, 40 miles would have been a really hard march. So, we see the urgency and how serious this man took the threat. Sends a big military contingent, gets Paul far enough away that it's like, okay, now I think it's safe to just continue with the horses, and recalls the rest of the troops. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear you when your accusers have come. So, are you under my jurisdiction? Cilicia is under my jurisdiction. Okay, I'll listen to you. But we have to wait until the people accuse you show up. Can't be a trial if you're not accused of anything. And he commanded him, Paul, to be kept in Herod's praetorium. And we'll get the rest of that story tomorrow as well. Until then, may God bless reading of His Word, and may God bless you. Bye.